I don't ask for much. A quiet life. A little respect. The ability to get in and out of my own damn house without a fight. For the most part, I have that. My home, a sleek, single-story house with wide doorways and a custom-built ramp, sits on a tree-lined street in an upper-middle-class neighborhood just outside Atlanta. It's a nice place. Clean sidewalks, well-manicured lawns, families riding bikes in the evenings. The kind of community where people smile at you in passing but never truly let you in. I learned that the hard way. When I moved in 2 years ago, I could feel the shift in energy the second my movers pulled up. A black man, alone, rolling up to a house they assumed belonged to someone else. The polite smiles tightened. Curtains twitched. A few of my new neighbors made a point to introduce themselves, their curiosity poorly disguised as hospitality. "Oh, so you bought this place?" one woman asked, blinking in surprise. "You must be in sports," her husband added, glancing at my wheelchair before offering a forced chuckle. I let those moments roll off my back. I was used to it. Used to the assumptions, the quiet skepticism, the unspoken question hanging in the air. How did you afford this? But I wasn't here to make friends. I was here because I liked the house. Because I worked damn hard for it. Because after a lifetime of fighting, through law school, through courtrooms, through a car accident that changed my entire existence, I had earned the right to live wherever the hell I pleased. Most of the time, I keep to myself. My work as a federal judge is demanding, and when I'm home, I like my peace. I read on my back porch, listen to jazz in the evenings, and take slow, steady laps around the neighborhood when the weather allows. I don't cause problems. I don't break the rules, but some people don't need a reason to see you as a problem, which is why, when I step outside one crisp Saturday morning and find Leonard Whitman, the HOA president, standing at the foot of my ramp with a clipboard in hand, my stomach tightens. "Morning, Mr. Carter," he says, flashing me a smile that doesn't quite reach his eyes. "I was hoping to catch you." I grip the wheels of my chair and roll down a few feet, stopping just short of him. "Something I can help you with?" He glances at the ramp, his expression flickering with disapproval. "I wanted to discuss your modification," he says, voice oozing with condescension. Some of the board members feel it's a bit of an eyesore. Not exactly in line with the aesthetic of the community. My jaw tightens. I know this game. I've seen it before, but Leonard has no idea who he's playing with, and he has no idea just how badly he's about to lose. This sets up the tension and foreshadows the conflict ahead. "Let me know if you want any tweaks." That first conversation should have been the end of it. I made it clear that my wheelchair ramp is legally protected, that the Americans with Disabilities Act overrides whatever nonsense HOA guidelines he's trying to enforce. But Leonard? He just smiles that tight, smug smile and says, "I'll bring it up at the next meeting." A week passes. Then another, and that's when I start noticing things. At first, it's small. A letter in my mailbox, no postage, just slipped in, politely, reminding me of the HOA's strict aesthetic guidelines. The next day, I find my trash bins moved from their designated spot, a bright yellow warning sticker slapped on them. Then, the complaints start. I hear whispers at the mailbox. Catch neighbors glancing at me before looking away. One morning, I step outside to find my lawn flagged with a notice, "Violation, unapproved exterior modification." I let out a sharp laugh, running a hand over my jaw. They really think I'm new to this. I know exactly what's happening. I've seen it before. The slow, calculated push to make someone feel unwelcome. The little inconveniences, the mistakes, the warnings meant to exhaust you into compliance, but I don't rattle easily. So I send an official response to the HOA, citing federal law. I make a call to my attorney, just to have my bases covered. I go about my business, but then, something shifts. One night, I hear voices outside my window. Low, murmured, just beyond the bushes near my ramp. I wheel over and glance out. Two figures stand at the curb, shadows barely visible in the dim glow of a street lamp. One of them gestures toward my house. Then, just as quickly as they appeared, they're gone. The next morning, I find a deep scratch running across the metal railing of my ramp. A coincidence? Maybe, but then another letter arrives. This one isn't typed. It isn't official HOA business. It's handwritten, ink pressed hard into the paper, as if the writer's hand was shaking with barely contained frustration. "This isn't the kind of neighborhood for people like you." I stare at it for a long moment, heat rising in my chest. Not anger. Not yet. Something worse, recognition. I fold the letter neatly, tuck it into my desk, and take a slow breath. Leonard and his people think they're playing a game. They think I'll tuck my tail, roll away, find somewhere else to live. They think they know who I am, but what they don't know, what they never bothered to find out, is that I don't lose, and I don't forget. The next time I see Leonard, I don't bother with pleasantries. It's a crisp Thursday morning, and he's standing at the HOA office, a small, beige building at the edge of the community park, chatting with 2 other board members. I wheel up the ramp, letter in hand, and push through the glass doors. Leonard glances up, and for the briefest second, I see it, that flicker of annoyance, quickly smoothed over with his usual smirk. "Mr. Carter," he says, all fake charm. "What can I do for you?" I drop the letter onto the desk between us. "This showed up at my house." His eyes barely flick over the words before he shrugs. And, I say, voice tight, "I want to know if this came from your office." One of the board members, a rail-thin woman with icy blonde hair, lets out a soft chuckle. "Oh, please," she says. "No one here would ever write something like that." I don't break eye contact with Leonard. "Then I assume you'll have no problem if I report it to the authorities." The smirk falters, just a little. But he recovers quickly, shaking his head. "You can do whatever you'd like, Mr. Carter. But I can assure you, the HOA isn't responsible for whatever this is." He picks up the letter between 2 fingers, as if it's contaminated, and slides it back toward me. "But while you're here," he adds, tone suddenly businesslike, "we need to discuss the upcoming changes to our community guidelines." I fold my arms. "What changes?" "We'll be implementing new standards to ensure consistency throughout the neighborhood. Things like lawn decor, fencing, exterior modifications." He waves a hand vaguely toward me. "Ramps." My fingers tighten on my wheels. "That ramp is ADA compliant. You can't touch it." Leonard sighs, as if I'm a child who just doesn't understand how the world works. "That may be, but as a private community, we have the right to enforce our own regulations. If we determine that something negatively impacts property values," he gives a small shrug. "Well, then we have a duty to act." I take a slow breath. I've argued constitutional law in front of packed courtrooms, ruled on cases that have changed lives. I don't get rattled by men like Leonard, but this isn't just about legalities. It's about power, and right now, Leonard thinks he has it. I push my chair back, giving him a slow nod. "All right." His smirk returns. He thinks I'm backing down. He has no idea what's coming. Gathering evidence. I spend the next few days doing my homework. I dig through public records, reviewing every complaint filed against the HOA in the last 5 years. Patterns emerge, warnings issued disproportionately to non-white residents, sudden rule changes that always seem to target the same people. I start talking to neighbors. Most don't want to get involved. Fear laces their voices, their eyes darting toward the ever-watchful HOA, but some, especially the older black homeowners, share their own stories. The sudden fines. The anonymous complaints. The quiet pressure to move. And then there's Marcus, a Latino father of 3 whose house sits 2 streets over. When I tell him what's been happening, his expression darkens. "They pulled the same thing on me last year," he mutters. "Told me my truck was unsightly and didn't fit the neighborhood. Started fining me every week until I gave up and got rid of it." I nod, my suspicions confirmed. This isn't about rules. It's about control. The breaking point. 3 nights later, I hear the noise. A metallic scrape. A sharp clang. Then, muffled voices. I roll to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to see 2 figures crouch near my ramp, tools in hand. One of them, the taller one, grabs the railing and yanks. The steel groans but holds. The other pulls something from his pocket, a wrench, maybe. They're trying to take it apart. My jaw clenches, adrenaline surging through my veins. I grab my phone, snapping a few quick pictures before dialing 911. "This is Judge Carter," I say the second the dispatcher picks up. "I need an officer at my residence immediately." The figures must hear something, maybe a creak from my chair, maybe my voice, because suddenly, they bolt. I roll onto my porch just in time to see them disappear into a black SUV. I don't need a license plate to know who sent them. This isn't just harassment anymore, this is an attack, and now, it's war. Leonard Whitman is about to have the worst day of his life. I make sure of it. The morning after the attempted vandalism, I go straight to the HOA meeting. Not as a homeowner. Not as a concerned resident. I go as a federal judge, armed with evidence. The meeting is held in the same beige building at the edge of the park, a space too small for the number of people packed inside. It's standing room only, neighbors shoulder to shoulder, murmuring in low voices. The tension in the air is thick, the kind that presses against your skin. At the front of the room, Leonard sits at a long table, flanked by the other board members. He looks completely at ease, fingers steepled, a smug half-smile on his face. He doesn't know what's coming. I roll forward, taking my place near the center. The murmurings quiet as people make room. Eyes flick toward me, some curious, some wary. A few of the older black residents nod subtly in my direction. They are waiting to see what happens next. So is Leonard. He leans back in his chair, adjusting his tie. "Mr. Carter," he says smoothly. "I wasn't expecting you today." I match his smile. "I figured I'd stop by." since the HOA seems to have taken such a special interest in my property. His smirk widens, as if he's already won. Well, I'm glad you're here, he says. Because we were just about to discuss a new resolution. He picks up a sheet of paper, clears his throat, and begins to read. Due to concerns over neighborhood uniformity and property values, the HOA will be implementing new regulations regarding exterior modifications. This includes, but is not limited to, fences, sheds, decorative structures, and any additional attachments to the front of a home, including ramps. A murmur ripples through the room. I can feel the shift, the discomfort from some, the silent approval from others. Leonard sets the paper down, looking straight at me. We'll be requiring all non-compliant structures to be removed within 60 days. There it is, the final move. The arrogance in his voice is thick, his confidence unwavering. He thinks this is over. He thinks he's won. I let the silence stretch. Let him believe it. Then, slowly, I pull my phone from my pocket and tap the screen. A video plays. The grainy, black and white security footage from my house flickers to life. Two men, faces obscured, but bodies and movements unmistakable, crouched near my ramp, tools in hand. The sound of metal groaning, the hushed exchange of voices. A sharp gasp breaks the silence. Someone in the back mutters a curse. Leonard's smirk falters. I don't stop there. I press another button, and a second image appears, this one a legal document, projected onto the screen behind me. The Fair Housing Act, I say calmly, my voice carrying through the room. And the Americans with Disabilities Act. Both of which make it highly illegal for a homeowners association to discriminate against a resident based on race or disability. Leonard shifts in his seat, but I don't give him a chance to interrupt. I've also taken the liberty of gathering complaints from other residents who have been selectively targeted by HOA enforcement. I continue, my tone measured. And interestingly enough, there's a pattern. I glance at Marcus, standing near the side of the room. He nods, stepping forward. I got fined every week for parking my truck in my driveway, Marcus says, voice steady. But 3 houses down? White guy with the same truck. No fines. A few other voices pipe up. Yeah, they told me my shutters were the wrong color. But my neighbor painted his the exact same shade and never heard a word. Leonard's face is now a shade too pale, his jaw tightening. This is ridiculous, he mutters. These are isolated incidents. I tilt my head, eyes narrowing. Are they? With a final tap on my phone, the last image appears. A picture of the handwritten letter I received. The room is dead silent, and then, a single voice, one of the older black women in the back, speaks up. I recognize that handwriting, she says, her voice laced with quiet fury. That's Leonard's. Gasps. A ripple of shock, and just like that, his world collapses. Leonard's face drains of color. His hands curl into fists, his carefully constructed facade cracking. This is absurd, he sputters. You have no proof that I do. I pull out a final document and slide it across the table toward him. This is a formal complaint filed with the Department of Housing and Urban Development, I say coolly. Along with a lawsuit for civil rights violations. Seeing as I'm a federal judge, I imagine this is going to be inconvenient for you. Leonard just stares, his breath shallow. Then, from the back of the room, slowly, steadily, applause begins, and in that moment, I know I've won. The silence in the room is suffocating. Leonard's fingers twitch against the table, his face frozen in a mask of forced composure. But I see it, the way his chest rises too quickly, the slight tremor in his jaw. He's unraveling. Good. I lean back in my chair, giving him a long, measured look. No response? I ask, keeping my voice level. I'd have thought you'd have something to say for yourself. Leonard swallows hard. This is a gross mischaracterization, he snaps, trying to summon the arrogance he once wielded so effortlessly. He gestures toward the evidence on the screen. This doesn't prove anything. That footage? It could be anyone. That letter? Anyone could have written it. And as for these so-called complaints, he gives a forced, hollow laugh. Disgruntled residents who don't like following rules aren't exactly reliable witnesses. There it is. His last defense. Blame. Deny. Deflect. But I'm already one step ahead. I let out a slow breath and turn my gaze toward the doorway. That's an interesting argument, Leonard, I say. Let's see if it holds up against testimony from law enforcement. At that moment, the doors swing open. 2 uniformed police officers step inside, flanking a sharp-dressed woman in a navy blue blazer. Her presence alone commands attention, heels clicking against the tile, expression unreadable. Leonard's mouth falls open. I smile. Leonard Whitman, the woman says, her voice crisp and authoritative. My name is Lisa Rollins. I'm a federal investigator with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And we need to have a conversation. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Leonard visibly stiffens. "Hud," he croaks. Lisa steps forward, producing a file from the slim leather folder in her hands. "Your HOA has been under scrutiny for discriminatory enforcement practices for some time," she continues. "And thanks to Judge Carter's documentation, we now have enough evidence to move forward with a formal investigation." She places the file in front of him. "That includes harassment, intimidation, and willful violations of the Fair Housing Act." Leonard jerks upright. You can't be serious," he sputters. Lisa's eyes flick to the screen, where the security footage is still paused mid-frame. "I assure you, I am," she replies smoothly. "We also have an affidavit from one of your own board members confirming that you orchestrated targeted enforcement against minority residents." A gasp, Leonard snaps his head to the side, his eyes darting wildly across the faces of his fellow board members. One of them, Margaret, the icy blonde woman from before, shifts uncomfortably in her seat. She doesn't meet his gaze. Leonard stares at her. He breathes. Margaret folds her arms, her voice barely above a whisper. "I told you this was going too far." Leonard's face collapses, the confident smirk, the smug assurance, it's gone. In its place is pure, unfiltered panic. "No, no, no, no," he mutters under his breath, his hands shaking as he grabs the file in front of him. He flips through the pages, as if willing the words inside to disappear. "This is insane. You can't do this to me. I have rights." Lisa tilts her head. "And so do the people you targeted." The officers step forward. "Mr. Whitman, you're going to need to come with us." The moment the words leave the officer's mouth, Leonard snaps. "You think you can do this to me?" he roars, slamming his fists against the table. His chair screeches back as he leaps to his feet, wild-eyed. "I built this HOA. I run this neighborhood. You think some outsider in a wheelchair?" A sharp inhale cuts through the room, dead silent. The venom in his words lingers in the air, hanging heavy and damning, and just like that, any sympathy he might have had is gone. Even the people who once nodded along with him, who looked the other way when their black and brown neighbors were fined and harassed, they sit rigid now, eyes wide with horror. They see him now, and it's ugly. Leonard seems to realize it, too. His breath hitches, his hands trembling as he glances wildly around the room. But there's no saving this. No talking his way out. The officers move in, grabbing him firmly by the arms. "You can't do this," he shrieks, thrashing against their grip. "This is my neighborhood. I'll have you all evicted. You'll regret this." The officers don't say a word. They just haul him toward the door, and as Leonard Whitman, the man who thought he could bully and terrorize people out of their homes, gets dragged from his own meeting like a common criminal, the room erupts in applause. I exhale slowly, letting the satisfaction settle deep in my chest, because justice is sweet. Me know if you'd like any adjustments before moving to the Leonard Whitman loses everything in under a week. The arrest alone sends shockwaves through the neighborhood. A man who once held court over every property, every fine, every so-called violation, dragged out in handcuffs, screaming about his own power. The video goes viral before the police cruiser even leaves the parking lot, but that's just the beginning. Within hours, the HOA board holds an emergency vote to remove him as president. By morning, the local news runs an expose on his history of discrimination, fueled by testimonies from residents who've had enough of his reign. By the end of the week, HUD formally announces a full-scale investigation into the HOA's practices. Lawsuits start piling up, including mine. The community, his community, turns against him in an instant, their fear finally giving way to fury, and Leonard disappears. No one sees him at the house he once lorded over. His car vanishes from the driveway. There are rumors that his wife took the kids and left, that his company strongly suggested he resign. By the time his court date rolls around, he's just another disgraced man in an ill-fitting suit, facing charges that could ruin him financially and professionally. Justice, sweet, undeniable justice. I sit on my porch a few nights later, watching the sun dip below the tree line. It's peaceful. For the first time in a long time, I don't feel watched. I don't feel like an outsider in my own home. The ramp, my ramp, rests exactly where it belongs, untouched. A knock on the fence pulls me from my thoughts. I glance up to see Marcus, hands in his pockets, a hesitant smile on his face. "Got a minute?" he asks. I nod, gesturing for him to come up. He does, settling into the chair next to mine. For a while, we just sit there, listening to the crickets hum in the distance. Then, he exhales. "You really did it," he murmurs, shaking his head. "Took him down." I chuckle. "He took himself down." Marcus smirks. "Still. You showed us we didn't have to just take it. That we could fight back." A pause. Then, quietly, almost reluctantly, he adds, I should have done more. When I saw what was happening. When I saw how they were treating you. I didn't want to get involved, man. I told myself it wasn't my fight. I don't let him sit in that guilt. You see it now, I say. That's what matters. He nods slowly. Yeah. A beat of silence. Then, I was thinking. Maybe we should run for the board. You and me. I blinked. He laughs. I mean, someone's got to clean up the mess he left. Might as well be us, right? A slow grin spreads across my face, right? A week later, I roll into the first HOA meeting since Leonard's downfall. This time, I sit at the front of the room, not as a defendant, not as a target, but as a leader, and as I look around at my neighbors, some guilty, some hopeful, some determined, I know one thing for sure: this is our neighborhood, and we're never letting someone like Leonard take it from us again. This ending brings closure, emotional depth, and a sense of triumph. Let me know if you'd like any refinements.